Hello again and welcome to this first video briefing of 2013. In the United States, last-minute political bargains and legislative activity at the close of the year and the beginning of 2013 succeeded in delaying the much-talked-about fiscal cliff. Markets responded with predictable optimism and there was a collective sigh of relief around the world. We want, however, in this briefing to move beyond those immediate concerns and, with my colleague Dr. Tom Wells, our chief US analyst, to look at some of the longer-term trends facing and the outlook indeed facing the US economy this year. Tom, we ought, however, to begin just briefly with setting out what Congress did and did not do in the last few days.
Well, they basically addressed the revenue side of the fiscal cliff without addressing the spending side of the fiscal cliff. The revenue side, or I should say most of the revenue side. The revenue side is basically involves averting what would have been a universal reversion to pre-Bush era tax rates on income tax and capital gains for virtually all Americans. Instead, they restricted the reversion to Bush era tax rates to individuals who make over $400,000 a year, which will raise something like $600 billion in new revenue over 10 years. And they ended the payroll stimulus that was enacted originally after Obama's election and coming to office in 2009. What they delayed was the debate on current spending, how much that should be cut, defense spending, how much that should be reduced over 10 years, and most controversially, entitlement spending. So that is what we're looking at over the next 2 months. The problem that we're going to run into is probably another bout of brinkmanship involving the so-called debt ceiling, that is the statutory rule that prevents the U.S. from paying its own obligations, which it's incurred theoretically unless Congress raises this arbitrary ceiling on the national debt. So that's likely to become wrapped up in the whole debate, in unnerved markets for the next 2 months.
So we've got a lot of politics still ahead, but beyond that we've got some scenarios that speak to a sort of different sort of outcome for the economy this year.
Well, I think what we've been telling our clients since the middle of last year is to not worry about the fiscal cliff debate, that this was a risk, a potential outside risk, that if it were somehow you had this perfect alignment of negative forces would lead to disaster. But we dismiss this as really an extraordinarily unlikely sort of potential issue or consequence. Instead, what we've asked clients to do is to focus on the fundamentals. That's what we've tried to keep their attention on. And really the fundamentals in the U.S., as compared to anywhere else in the developed world, are good to improving in almost every area that you care to look, bar external demand, which still remains very weak.
Yeah. So let's just enumerate some of those fundamentals, because it is worth spending a bit of time doing so.
Well, the fundamentals basically that looked so bad in the immediate aftermath of the financial crisis of 2008 and the recession of 2007 to 2009 are all improving. Basically, household debt and household finances in general are steadily improving. There was a big fall in consumer spending after 2008, which did a lot of damage to the economy because 70% of the U.S. economy is driven by consumer spending. That is slowly coming back as more and more people get out from an underwater position in terms of their mortgages. That is, they pay down their mortgages sufficiently so their mortgage is less than the current assessed value of their home, as they pay off credit card debt and other revolving debt. The housing market in general is starting to improve, partly as a result of this process. So you're starting to see demand come back into the market, potential buyers return. You're starting to see a fall in the so-called overhang of unsold homes that are waiting to come on the market. Those are foreclosed or otherwise distressed properties as a result of mortgages that have gone bad. And you're also starting to see additional factors come into play, like development of the oil and gas sector, which has been very positive. You're also starting to see a return to health of the banking sector, which was many banks found themselves with significantly impaired asset bases after the property price bust and indeed the collapse of several large corporates, or near collapse of several large corporates. But the combination of very stiff stress tests and forced bailouts, forced recapitalizations via, in some cases, government bailouts, makes the U.S. banking sector actually very strong compared to what it was pre-2008, and certainly compared to the European banking sector at the moment. All of that is a really good sign for the consumer market, consumer credit in the United States going forward.
There's going to be some impact as a result of the measures that were passed, particularly on the payroll taxes. Let's just talk about the difficulties in the first quarter that may arise because of that, because we can't just dismiss it completely.
Well, we think actually the major impediment to economic growth as a result of the fiscal consolidation that will go on this year will be as a result of the end of the payroll tax stimulus, because that affects almost everybody. That is, all those individuals who make less than about $120,000 a year and pay payroll taxes. All of those individuals will pay about 2% more of their income in payroll taxes. That'll take, over the course of the year, about $120 billion out of the consumer economy. That's going to account for a lot of the slowing that we will see during the first half, but particularly the first quarter, as consumers get used to taking this hit. But over the course of the year, the positive factors that we were talking about, we think, are going to outweigh that negative factor. And so you will actually see by the end of the year growth that is significantly stronger, we think in the upper end of the 2% range, maybe even about 3% by the end of the year. Overall growth probably above 2.5% for all of 2013.
Good. And let's conclude, Tom, where we began, with this issue of political dysfunctionality, which has caught so many headlines and has been regarded as the chief impediment to otherwise a much brighter and more confident outlook. Is this going to be the characteristic of Obama's second term? Are we going to be subject to the protracted agonies of this political process for some time now?
The answer is yes and no, but it's easy to, I think overall the advice that I'd give is that it's easy to become distracted by the procedural elements of the governing process in the United States, which in the context of near record political polarization — there have been more polarized periods in U.S. history, but not since the 19th century — make for a very ugly process. Bismarck, I believe, is the first person to have compared the legislative process to sausage making, and it is ugly. You really don't want to know what goes into the sausage. But the point is, and this is a point we've repeatedly made here at OA, the U.S. has a demonstrated ability to respond quickly in the event of a real and severe crisis, as we saw in 2008, 2009, when it responded very well. That is, the legislative process. It was ugly. There were some dicey moments, but really they got done what they really needed to do. They executed a number of very unpopular measures, including TARP and the financial industry bailout, the auto sector bailout, that in retrospect look very helpful to the economy and have gotten the country to the position where it now finds itself, where compared to basically the rest of the developed world, it's in a position to grow.
Tom, thanks very much. And thank you very much for watching this video briefing. If you'd like to find out how our analytical and advisory services can help you with your investment decisions and your business operations, we'd be delighted to hear from you. Do contact us via our website.